I spent the day yesterday on the river with my, not mine, it's a loaner, my Bruce & Walker Powerlight Spey caster, 15-foot 7/9 Spey rod. And I have it lined with the Gale Force 15-meter extended shooting head, which can be used as a dry line, or it does real good with a sink tip. For the sink tip, I have the OPST 96 grain density compensated, I think it's the riffle sink tip. So basically it's the same weight as T8, there's 12 feet of it. So this extended, I think it's called the extended shooting head, 15 meter, and it actually works, I thought, better with the sink tip on it. So this is a great setup. I fished it yesterday on the Deschutes. It's a great setup for if you want to do less stripping and still cast a legitimate sink tip and swing for flies in the bright of the day or in the winter. Anyway, it's a really good setup. This thing is just wonderful. So we might talk a little bit today about fishing longer heads and casting longer heads with the sink tip on them. 15 meters is just under 50 feet. So with a 12-foot sink tip, you know, that's a legitimate traditional Spey line with a sink tip. And it's a little bit different game, but effective if you want to fish a little deeper and swing a little slower than a floating line, and if you want to strip less. Stripping becomes less of an issue. So for casting longer sinking lines, or in this case long line with a sink tip, there's a few tricks you can do. There's never going to be a perfect way to fish because, yeah, you can save stripping by using a long line with a sink tip, but you're not going to be able to cast the big flies like you can with Skagit. At least I can't. Skagit is easy and it's good for heavy stuff and heavy sink tips and big flies, but then you have to strip a lot if you do cast a long ways. There's always compromises, so you just pick your poison and try to have fun. That's my opinion anyway. It is fun to fish longer line with a sink tip and a manageable fly. For me, that's what I kind of like to play with. And one thing that's really helped me is to have a comp line that's starting to get worn out. So the core is exposed in a lot of places towards the end. It gets weighted down. And also I've never washed it in the last 4 or 5 years. So it's filthy, it's heavy, and it acts like a sinking line. And I should wash it, but one thing that I've learned by not washing it is what it takes to deal with a sinking line. And one of the things that happens, see, I just cast it out like that. So if I can't single spay it right now, unless we'll try, okay? We'll try, because it's starting to sink. So if I was to single spay it, I'd lift high, sweep high, and so I gotta cast right away. And if I don't cast right away and it starts to sink, I'm gonna have to roll cast it or parry poke it to the surface, and then when I get it on the surface, then I'm gonna have to cast immediately so it doesn't sink. And in still water, when there's no tension, it's really gonna drop like a rock. So I've heard guys talk about, you know, roll casting their heavily weighted sink tip, you know, it takes a few times just to get it to the top so you can cast again. So if it's all about keeping your fly in the water, which I like that philosophy, because if you have to monkey around and you can't fish because you're roll casting before you can cast, that's an issue. So there's that to think of. But the other thing that will help, okay, I'm gonna I'm going to cast out again and let it sink. Okay, let it sink. Now the other thing I can do if I want to get my sinking line that probably right now will not single spey, I can throw a spiral spey in there. So I can lift, circle, sweep. Okay, so you lift, circle around, and then push out with your bottom hand and rotate and cast it. I'll do it again. So a spiral spey in this case is really, see, I tried to snake roll it, it wasn't happening. But I'll do it right next time. I wasn't thinking. Okay, I'm gonna let it sink. I'm gonna spiral spey, so I'm gonna point towards the target, lift, go around, rotate my body. Boom! The anchor landed perfectly, but you have to be careful when you're fishing this way. Do not, I like to anchor when I just have yarn or something on there to land right in front of me. If I'm fishing, I don't want to get hooked, so I might scoot it to my, out of the way of my target. So that's one thing that'll help now. Since I failed the snake roll test, I'm gonna do that again. Okay, so it's been out there, it's probably sunk. I'm gonna try a really high, slow lift, throw it. See, I couldn't even get it out of the water. That's crazy. So, if you can't get it out of the water, see, maybe now I can do it. Okay, that time I did, but I had to lift real slow and high and then come across my body and get as much as that belly out of the water before I could cast it. With a legitimate sink tip, that's going to be tough. I will say that the Gale Force extended, I think it's called a 15-meter extended shooting head with a sink tip, is a really nice line for casting a moderate sink tip. So if you do have a really heavy sunk line, I find that if I use my body more, keep my hands out here, but really lift, use my legs, try to use my big muscles to pull the thing out of the water and not just lift and sweep like that, but use my torso and my legs. See, that thing is sunk. So for lifting a big nasty one out of the water, I might go see, and I still didn't get it out of the water. But the idea is to use leverage. Use your bottom hand against your top hand and use your legs and use your core and use your big muscle groups, because it's not just going to happen with just your arms. So let's try another snake roll, and I'm going to do a high lift, cross my body. The main thing I would say is don't hook yourself in the face. Okay, parry poke it back to the top. Okay, I'm gonna let it settle in there, and then I'm gonna let it sink, see if I can snake roll it up. Okay, so the secret was high lift, and then instead of throwing it that way, I kind of took it across my body more and then rotated my body around before the cast. It's something you'll have to experiment. The main thing all this spey casting, experiment and see what works for you. That's most important. Don't overthink it. If you've watched my videos, you'll have a good grasp of the fundamentals, and then stick to those fundamentals and just practice and practice and see what little tweaks work for you, best for you and your body type and your, all that. Factor that in and use your imagination, what works best for you. And the main thing is, if you are getting your body sore or tired, that's the worst thing. If your casting is fun and easy and efficient and it doesn't wear your body out and you like the results, then stick with that. And then just tweak a little here and there and find out what works best for you.
That'll do it. Boom. No.